Whenever I talk to people who don't watch fighting, I always try to tell them that boxing is more dangerous than MMA because of the 10 count rule. And even with saying that and how there's no deaths related to MMA, thank God, we've still seen some really nasty injuries in this sport. And a lot. Since I started watching over the pandemic, I've seen some really brutal injuries, either through live footage or just going back through the tapes and watching what had happened to other fighters. I want to talk about some today. And before we get started, I just want to give a quick thank you to these fighters, man. Thank you, Warriors, for sacrificing your health so that I have something to do from 3 p.m. to 10 p.m. every Saturday. And I speak for all of us whenever I say this. No matter what I say on this channel in the predictions video or the recaps and who sucks and who's bad, thank you guys for putting on these fights, because honestly my life would be a lot more dull without them, so it's a good thing. In order to fairly assess how I'm going to be breaking down the picks, I'm going to be scoring each of them based off of a fear meter. How afraid would I be to have something like this happen to me? That's the question I'm going to be asking. On a scale of 1 to 10, I'm going to evaluate each of the situations and the case studies that I'm going to bring up right now. So the first guy that we're going to talk about is going to be Anderson Silva. This is a classic, man. And this was a stomach-churning leg break versus Chris Weidman. He tried to avenge his first loss in years and somehow suffered a worse defeat that time. Him losing the belt marked the end of his reign. But this moment right here, whenever he broke his leg in the second round of the rematch, this began the decline of his career, because he was never the same after this. How could you be? And this is very sad to have happened to a legend who could have accomplished way more in the time that he had lost due to the recovery. If he was still able to compete, he probably would have gotten that belt back. He probably had a third round KO for us right in his back pocket that we just didn't see. And he didn't get to pull it out and show it because his leg was in 8 bits on the ground. The night he fought Chris Weidman in the rematch, he definitely had the stankiest leg in the arena. And I would be mortified if this happened to me in competition. All those people watching you, and this is your big moment to redeem yourself, and something like this happens, oh my gosh. That might be the end of the world for me, like mentally. I'm not sure how he came back to this and like didn't give up on fighting with having something this traumatic happen to him. Because he would have been the first that it happened to on such a large scale. But not the last. The second guy that we'll talk about is going to be Chris Weidman. Chris Weidman suffered the same fate as Anderson Silva in the Bizarro realm, where he broke his other leg. So Chris Weidman broke his right leg. I think that Anderson Silva got his left one done in. Whoever's involved in a fight where one of these leg breaks happens, they need to be very careful for the rest of their career, because it follows. And this was a trash fight that Uriah Hall was fighting Chris Weidman in, and Chris Weidman was low-key winning the fight. And this derailed Chris Weidman's career because he missed 2021, 2022, and 2023 at the age of 36 at the time that it happened. And he's 40 now, and he's still competing, which is an absurdity. In my opinion, I think that he should have retired far before this had the opportunity to happen. Because before this leg break could fruit, he had been on basically like a 6-fight skid. His only 2 wins in this 8-fight streak were against really insignificant opponents, and he was losing every single contender matchup that they were trying to put him through to get him back into the rankings. So realistically, he was just playing games here. This is another 10 out of 10 right here. I would definitely be on some my leg timing if that happened to me, like no doubt. That would hurt so badly. Oh my gosh, I can't even show it. Partially because I don't want the YouTube algorithm to see it, and another part because I just don't want to look at it. It's that gruesome. The next thing that we're going to talk about, it's going to be Tom Aspinall, our boy. He tore his MCL and his meniscus, and he suffered some ACL damage once upon a time against Curtis Blades. He hurt himself with a kick that he threw, and I saw no check on the kick. It was a flush leg kick that landed. I'm not sure how he destroyed his knee in the process of throwing this kick, but just always remember that whenever we watch Tom Aspinall compete, we're watching a nerfed Tom Aspinall fight in the octagon. And this injury looked very painful and degrees worse than my tear that I suffered at my gym. That's kind of the whole basis of me making this video. I'm hurt. So I'm like, man, who else has been hurt? There was this one about 4-month stretch where so many fighters were getting hurt. I think we got Fiziev, Brian Ortega, and Tom Aspinall around the same relative time frame. And that was so unfair because those were great fights that we were robbed of. But these injuries did happen and they mattered. But not really so much for Tom Aspinall because he did manage to come back and become interim champion. So, as far as this going down, in the wrestling room where I was just training and nobody was around, it was kind of low stakes and it just happened and it was pretty calm. But here, he was actually in a fight and there were a lot of people watching and it mattered. He was in England, I believe. This is where this went down. He required a stretcher to exit the arena. So I would rate this one an 8 as far as, oh my gosh, my career. That's what the 8 in fear would be from. It wouldn't be necessarily from the state of my body, but man, what does this mean for me now? The next fighter that we're going to talk about is going to be Jack Jenkins. He suffered a gruesome shoulder dislocation versus Chet Mariscal. He didn't let go of this wizard lock through a judo throw, and he paid the ultimate price for the decision that he made. This dude is a leg kick machine, and he has multiple finishes with him in the UFC, and he still has both of his legs at least. He's rebounded against Herbert Burns since he took his layoff. He lost all of 2023, basically. And then he was subbed in his last fight against Gabriel Santos. And his shoulder injury is very unfortunate because he was a pretty good prospect in the weight class that he competed in. This likely will matter for him in his career moving forward, the fact that he did hurt his shoulder. So he could be in the U.S. Army with a highlight like that. But he kind of walked it off when it happened, though. It was weird because he went down and then he realized that he was hurt and he just grabbed his wrist and supported his arm and he made the pain face and then he just left. He didn't even speak. It was really sad, honestly. I'm glad that he recovered and I hope that he can get back on track and I hope that this injury doesn't matter for him moving forward because this is a good prospect and I hope that we can rekindle some of the old hype for him with a couple more wins. The next fight that we're going to talk about will be Belal Muhammad. And people are going to disagree and be like, oh, Belal was a baby. But, dude, look at that eye poke, bro. And if you see the actual picture of the eye poke, Leon Edwards didn't just really poke his eye. He basically, like, scooped his cornea and dug his finger into the bottom of his eyelid and pulled. And that's the reason why it looks the way that it does. That was one of the worst eye pokes I've ever seen. And taking some type of strike and not being able to see is probably scarier than anything that we've discussed up until this point. Imagine blunt force impact causes you to not be able to see. And you're like, okay, so for how long? Because that could have been permanent. And that's probably what goes through your head at a certain point where you can't see after maybe 30 seconds of blinking frequently and trying to get your eye back. That's probably so stressful to deal with in a fight. And he was low-key getting cooked by Leon. And this was definitely an out for him to rally and try again with improved skills later. So everything for a reason. I mean, this ended up being fine. But he didn't really know that in the moment. And there's no way for him to have known that in the moment. And he lost his title shot opportunity, which is not good for him. But it ended up working out. So in retrospect, it did look intensely painful too. I would say this is about a 6.5 as far as the fear meter went. It would be mainly for my health. Because it seems like Belal Muhammad always believed in his skills, and he was probably only frustrated with the fact that he didn't get to continue competing because of the fact that he might have lost his vision, and that's the really scary part. So, 6.5. We'll move on and talk about the next person. It'll be Victor Henry. He suffered a devastating nut shot from Javid Basharat. This was the inside low kick of infinite agony and despair, and he couldn't recover in 5 minutes. So, imagine how bad the force behind that kick must have been whenever it landed on his cup, to the point where he couldn't recover. And how long is that? 300 seconds? That's a considerable amount of time if you were to just sit down and count to 300 with 1 second in between each number that you counted. You could really feel the pain in his day whenever this happened. In this picture that you're looking at right now, you can really see the pain in his day. And this didn't have lasting impact on his career. And he was probably fine after sleeping that night. But this is still a 10 out of 10, bro. And if you've taken like a flush impact to the groin in the training room, you know what I'm talking about. Especially if you don't train with a cup. That makes you want to go and buy a cup and start wearing one. The next guy that we're going to talk about will be the notorious Conor McGregor. And he was doing an Anderson Silva cosplay in Dustin Poirier 3. And he wasn't really taking Dustin Poirier seriously or fighting at that point. And even after getting cleanly TKO'd by Dustin Poirier in the second fight, it seemed like he was still only there to cut promos. And this was a humiliating loss for him after all the trash he talked, because I said he was just cutting promos the whole time. And this was the rubber match, so this was where he really should have locked in. And he grimaced in pain a few times after it happened, but he was still coherent enough to cut a promo, you know. Your wife is in me DMs, or your husband, what is he saying? Your Your wife is your husband or something. Your husband is your wife. I don't know what he was talking about. He turned this nasty scene into something we still all kind of meme on. Conor McGregor just has this ability to just become a showman no matter what the conditions are. So if that was as painful as it looked like, we'll never know, because Conor McGregor's poker face is on 8 million. The next two that we're going to talk about on the list is going to be Robert Whittaker. In his last fight against Khamzat Chimaev, he went to the Chechen dentist, we'll say. And mouth injuries? No, we're not going to go there, man. Mouth injuries while competing are something not even some of the most rugged individuals would be able to fight through. If you just got your teeth smashed while you're fighting, you do not want to fight anymore. There's very few things that would be a deterrent to most people. That's one of them. Robert Whittaker was actually turned into the xenomorph by Khamzat Chimaev's squeeze of a face crank that wasn't even locked in all the way, and he wasn't even squeezing for that long. This is probably the scariest injury you can suffer while fighting, because it's more private than others, where like people see that your leg is broken, and that's part of it, is the theatrics of the fact that you are kind of performing and fighting, and that this happened and it's a spectacle. Whenever something super private like that happens, only you really know about it, and that heightens the stakes of, like, please help me. You may not be able to get this fixed immediately either. And honestly, out of all the injuries that we'll talk about right now, this is an absolute horror movie Nigerian nightmare. This is a 10 out of 10. There's no way you're tanking that and continuing to fight. Not even the toughest guys can continue to fight through this. This is dubious. The next fighter that we're going to talk about is Irene Aldana. And whenever I do these types of lists, I don't really talk about women that much, but she definitely gets a mention here for the fact that she was Grand Canyon maxing. She was Demogorgon maxing in her fight against Norma Dumont. This is probably the worst WMMA injury I've ever seen. I was thinking maybe, the hematoma on Joanna whenever she fought with Wei Li, or this fight. This fight definitely gets it. I couldn't post the actual photos from inside of the octagon. I couldn't put any of the pictures from her in the octagon on the PowerPoint because it looks like she headbutted a belt sander. And she was getting boxed up by Norma Dumont too. And it was a really uncomfortable feeling watching this happen to a woman. Whenever I watch brutal KOs happen to women, even though I like watching sleepy KOs, it always kind of makes me feel a little empty whenever it happens to a girl. And that's years of her life gone as well through the beating that she took. You could actually see her brain, kind of. So thank God corners never bring mirrors with them, or else she probably would have chickened out, because she looked like a 2000s wrestler. She looked like Mankind in there. It was crazy. I would say this is like an 8 out of 10. If I was able to see myself, maybe higher. But me losing all of the blood from my face and the cold sensation of the blood just being all over me would definitely freak me out. And this is some scary movie stuff too. The next guy that we're going to talk about is going to be Sean Strickland. He got his nose broken in 6 places in that fight. I didn't even know that happened. I obviously got his nose broken because he was like... But I didn't know that it broke in 6 places. Pow, right in the kisser. Pow, right in the kisser. And it's funny because he tried to technically box with Drickus, and that is actually impossible. As we've discussed in the last video, or one of the last videos that I've done, Drickus is a different animal. And he pulled using head movement that would have been pretty intelligent against anyone else except for Drickus, because Drickus was comboing like a madman in the pocket with Sean Strickland, and Sean Strickland was trying to be poised and parry and slip and stuff. He pulled and caught a straight that landed right at the tip of Sean Strickland's sniffer. Like, none of the punch connected with the rest of the base of his face. It caught him right on the tip of his nose in the bridge. And that's the reason why it broke. The blunt force impacts on your nose. If you've been jabbed in training or sparring, you know what I'm talking about. It makes your eyes water. And they sting too. They sting. Even if you press on your nose really hard, you can make your eyes water, and it'll sting too whenever you stop doing it. And he couldn't breathe as well. I couldn't imagine not being able to breathe until you readjusted your nose, and then having to deal with the blood loss as well. All while having a very motivated Drickus du Plessis in front of you. So with all of these combined factors, his chances of getting finished went way up after this. So he's a good fighter for the fact that he didn't get knocked out. He made it to the last bell. So that was a big accomplishment for him. I would say this is a 9 out of 10, breaking your nose the way that he did in the fight. Colby Covington is the next fighter. He got manhandled by Joaquin Fuckley, and then he broke his foot against Leon. So we'll compound both of these different things that happened. He nearly had his eyelid punched off. He also broke his foot in the first minute of the Leon fight. Still don't know where it happened. If you were to go back and watch the footage in the entire fight, you can't really pinpoint the exact moment when he broke his foot, if that did happen super early on. He still didn't get finished, though, in that fight, because he's the GOAT, so... Colby Covington, Army, rise up. It's hard to say which is worse, because both of these performances, they're pretty embarrassing for him. The loss to Leon Edwards was probably about as embarrassing as losses come, because Trump was there, and he just went out sad. He didn't do anything the whole fight. And if his foot really was broken, because he didn't make excuses afterwards, because whenever you're a guy like him, nobody's going to listen to them. So if he did say, you guys, I broke my foot, nobody would care. So he didn't even say anything like that. But I think that somebody from his camp leaked the information. It was like, yeah, he broke his foot super early into the fight. And he was fighting like it. So if that were true, very believable. But since he is such a game fighter, this was more of like an inconvenience or an embarrassment for him in the fight. Because it was never going to make him not fight. And this was the ghost of Woodley acting on the behalf of both of the fighters, Joaquin Buckley and Leon Edwards, making him suffer these types of injuries. And the Buckley one definitely needs to be spoken of more. The next fighter that we'll talk about is someone who I draw a likeness to myself with. I see myself in Darren Till. I have a special connection with Darren Till for the fact that we both torn our ACLs. And the way that he did it too, it's very similar. He tore an off-screen filler arc where he wasn't even around in a fight. There was no checked kick or moment in one of his competed bouts where you're like, oh wow, Darren Till just tore his ACL. There was no Duke the Stupid ever. He just showed up one time to fight Derek Brunson and he was fat. And he was in a chubbed up form that we'd never seen him in. And it looked like he didn't do cardio during his camp. He didn't wrestle during his camp, he said in an interview following that. And it really just makes you think about what could have been. Because this injury may not have ended his career had he been more disciplined and taking more time off to recover. Because even still on the busted ACL that he didn't properly let heal, he was having good fights against fighters like Dricus du Plessis and stuff afterwards, who would become literal champions. I think he dropped Dricus or something crazy like that. And I basically done the same thing as Till in my gym, so... If I ever see him, I'll be like, mate, I tore me fucking ACL, mate, just like you, mate. You and I are the same. I tore me fucking ACL. And then me, him, and Hamza will all go to Saks Fifth Avenue and buy Montclair puffers. I would say this is about a 4 out of 10. If it was about anything the same as whenever I tore my ACL, I was about a 4 out of 10 on the fear scale. It just kind of sucked, honestly. It didn't hurt me too bad. It was painful, but it just kind of sucked more than anything else. So 4 out of 10, I'd say. The next fighter that we're going to talk about will be Jack Della Maddalena. His arm broke cleanly in half versus Gilbert Burns. And this was a very crazy thing that we found out after the fact, because this was an important contender matchup. And this boy JDM is such a savage for not letting anyone know that he had been hurt until like a day afterwards. He just let people talk about whatever they thought about his performance before he scored that knee that ended the fight. Because he lost all of those rounds before he won the fight. He was losing all the way before he was winning. And whenever he started winning, it was enough to end the fight. So, we'll see what happens, because he got sidelined by this for the entirety of last year. Pretty much, he didn't compete after that happened. And into this year, so he's taken about a year off at this point. That third round TKO was so amazing, man. And the time loss hasn't showed up as a larger issue in his career just because he hasn't fought again. So we'll see how he deals with this. That's his arm in the x-ray. Clean break through the forearm. The forearm seems like a pretty inopportune place to be suffering from a nagging injury in a division full of expert kickboxers. In a fight, though, if I break my arm like he broke it, and I can detect that there's something wrong with me, I'm going to be very fearful. No matter like the confidence in my abilities, we're going to get it done still. There's no courage without fear. You have to remember this, but this is going to freak me out whenever I realize, and I like press on my bone and I feel the give. That's definitely going to tamper with my emotional state to where I may need to get reeled back in by my coach or go to my happy place in my head, because that looks pretty grim. The next fight that we're going to discuss is going to be Tyron Woodley. Ow, ow, my rib, versus Colby Covington. How could anyone forget? He played, I'll beat your ass before the fight, and then he got his ass beat. Classic. Back when Colby was good, this happened, so this was actually an entertaining fight. It was the lay and pray style, and it actually just ended up with Tyron Woodley going, "Oh, my rib, my rib." Woodley went out super sad before leaving the UFC, and you really do hate to see it. This is a funny meme in the community more than anything, and he actually did break his rib too, because if you type in Tyron Woodley rib, you see photos like this one in the video too, because it's a popular soundbite, but you also see the x-rays that support that he actually did break his rib. So I think that people were wrong for just assuming that he was a bullsy at first, because I mean, you can't keep on fighting after you break your rib, man. So we give Kevin Holland a pass, but we want to be critical of Tyron Woodley. Tyron Woodley had an out definitely in that fight. He broke his rib. That's not a good look. You can't keep fighting. So upon consistent reflection, I'm coming to realize how not fragile we are as people, but we're definitely not Luke Cage and made out of bullets. Like, we can definitely be hurt and maimed. So we have to be careful in anything that we do, not even necessarily training and fighting. We have to take care. So that's what I want you to do today. I want you to like, comment, and subscribe, and also take care.